his feet in the air with a man on top of him clapping his cheeks. Colin was jailed for 35 years in prison, but today's story isn't going to be about Colin. We are instead going to focus on Colin's best friend called Stuart, who was on his way to see Colin in prison for the very first time since Colin was locked up. After Colin was jailed for 35 years, his entire family disowned him and cut him off from his weekly allowance. He was devastated. Once Stuart arrived at the prison, he was searched while his items were put through an X-ray machine. This took some time to be completed, so in the meantime Stuart had to wait in line. He had to wait in a queue. Stuart hated waiting in queues and normally just paid people to hold his spot if he was ever anywhere where there were queues, but this is prison and you can't just do things like that. So once the security process was finished, Stuart said to the guards, "You should have a priority line for rich people like me because I shouldn't have to wait in line with all these peasants." The guards were all shocked by what Stuart had just said, so one of the guards replied to Stuart saying, "Somebody's going to teach you a lesson one day." Stuart just smiled at the guard and said, "Teach me a lesson? Well, it's not going to be you." Stuart then walked past the guard into the visiting room laughing, where he saw Colin sitting on a chair, so he walked over and gave him a hug saying, "It's good to see you, friend." Colin thanked Stuart for coming to see him because everyone else in his life just abandoned him after he was sentenced. Stuart asked Colin how was it like in prison. Colin laughed and told Stuart, "Prison is easy because I run my entire wing. I am the boss and everyone listens to me." The two spoke for another hour before the visit was over. The guards took Colin back to his cell while Stuart walked towards the exit door to go home, but before he could leave he was approached by the guard from earlier who stopped him from going through the door, telling him, "Where are you going, prisoner?" Stuart replied saying, "Prisoner? Who are you calling a prisoner? Because I'm not a prisoner. I came here to visit my friend Colin." All the other guards could now hear Stuart and the guard arguing, so they all rushed over to see what was going on. The guard showed the other guards Stuart's name, prison number, and also a note saying Stuart suffers from mental illness, so he doesn't realize he is actually a prisoner. All the guards had now seen Stuart was in fact a prisoner trying to escape, so the guards chased him around the visiting floor before tackling him to the ground, and in the process Stuart ended up hitting his head on the floor and knocking himself out cold. The guards then handcuffed Stuart and brought him back to a cell they thought was his. Time had now passed and Stuart was starting to wake up from what he thought was the worst dream of his life, only to open his eyes and see his feet in the air with a man on top of him clapping his cheeks. Stuart screamed and shouted at the man saying, "Get off me," but the man just continued to pound his cheeks while saying, "Scream, woman. Scream louder for me, baby." Stuart was now wide awake and could see a big black man on top of him pounding his cheeks, but he couldn't get him off because he was just too strong. Stuart pleaded with the man to stop pounding his cheeks because he was hurting him, but the man did not stop. He just continued to pound Stuart's cheeks even harder until he started to feel a nice sensation in his tings, and that's when he cream-pied Stuart. The man then got off of Stuart and climbed down the ladder back onto his bottom bunk, where he went to lay down and relax. Stuart looked around and realized he was in a prison cell. He realized he was not dreaming and not at home. He was in fact in prison. He then got off his bunk bed and walked over to look in the mirror and saw he had cream pie all over his face and also cream pie dripping out of him. He also noticed he had red lipstick on. His fingers and toenails were painted white and he also had a blonde wig on. He then turned around and asked the black guy laying down, "What's going on and why did you just turn me out?" The big black guy got up off the bed and said to Stuart, "Let's get things straight around here, woman. From this point going forward, you are my girlfriend and you will give me your cheeks whenever I want them. I have already been clapping your cheeks for the past 5 hours while you were knocked out cold, so you are all loosened up now. I even had time to put lipstick on you and also paint your fingers and toenails with white paint, so you better not take any of it off because it took me a long time to do it all. We are getting ready to go to dinner soon, so put these booty shorts on, woman, so you can look even more pretty." Stuart ran towards the door to try and escape until he realized it was a prison door that only opens from the outside. The black guy just looked at him and started laughing. He then walked over and slapped Stuart while saying, "Girl, you better listen to me because you don't want to see me angry." Stuart immediately stopped and started to listen while putting on the booty shorts because the slap felt like he just got hit with a bag of bricks. He had never actually been hit before, so this was the first time he felt this type of pain. The black guy introduced himself and said, "My name is Tyrone and I'm doing 22 years in prison." He then asked Stuart, "What are you in here for?" Stuart replied saying, "I'm not in here for anything because I didn't do anything. I'm not supposed to be in prison. I only came to this prison to visit my friend Colin, but as I was about to go home a guard lied and told the other guards that I'm a prisoner when I'm really not. The other guards believed him and tackled me to the ground as I tried to run. In the process I fell on the ground hitting my head and that's all I remember. I then woke up with you on top of me clapping my cheeks." Tyrone started laughing while saying to Stuart, "Your cheeks are sweet. You have sweet cheeks." Stuart then replied saying, "I don't even remember walking into this cell." Tyrone then said, "That's because you didn't walk in. The guards threw you in. I waited 5 minutes to see if you would get up off the floor, but you didn't, so I just picked you up and put you on the top bunk. I painted your fingers and toenails. I put lipstick on you along with the blonde wig so you could look extra pretty. I then finished you off by clapping your cheeks multiple times while you were knocked out. In fact, I've been clapping your cheeks for the last 5 hours and it was sweet." The cell door suddenly opened and it was the guard that sent Stuart to prison. He shouted time for dinner while he walked off laughing. Tyrone then grabbed Stuart by the hand and said, "Here, take this," as he handed Stuart the inside of his left pocket. Tyrone then said, "You will walk with me to the canteen and don't let go of my pocket or I will slap you in front of everyone at dinner." Stuart, not knowing what to do, just agreed because he didn't want to be slapped again, so they both started walking towards the canteen while Stuart held on to Tyrone's left pocket. Stuart thought to himself, "What if Colin's on my wing? He will be able to help me because he is the leader of his wing. Colin should be able to get me out of here when he tells them I'm not a prisoner, so I can leave this place and go home." Tyrone and Stuart walked inside the canteen and to Stuart's amazement he saw Colin sitting with a bunch of big black guys on a table. Stuart was shocked because Colin had on makeup, red lipstick on his lips with a brunette wig on. Colin could now see Stuart looking right at him while also looking shocked to see Stuart. Colin was confused, thinking to himself, what is Stuart doing here? Stuart and Tyrone got their food, but as Stuart went to walk over to talk to Colin, Tyrone called him and said, "Woman, come here now. We are eating our dinner in our cell today." Stuart stopped and went back to the cell with Tyrone. Once they finished dinner, Tyrone demanded Stuart come down from his bunk and suck his tings. Stuart pleaded with Tyrone to just leave him alone because he's not into this type of stuff. Tyrone got angry and got up from his bunk and grabbed Stuart's leg and pulled him off the bed. Stuart flew through the air and hit his head and back on the prison floor hard. Tyrone was 6'2" with massive muscles, and he was not playing around, so he started slapping Stuart in a savage rage of blows. Stuart could not take any more hits, so he just gave up and said, "Okay Tyrone, stop. Please stop. I will do it. I will suck your tings. Please just stop hitting me." Tyrone grabbed Stuart by the head and picked him up off the floor and then told him to get on his knees and suck his tings. Stuart followed Tyrone's demands and got on his knees and put Tyrone's big tings in his mouth and proceeded to suck Tyrone's tings. He sucked Tyrone's tings for 10 minutes before Tyrone cream pied Stuart's mouth and also sprayed cream pie all over Stuart's face. Tyrone had a long day, so he got into his bed and was fast asleep within 2 minutes. Stuart couldn't believe what was happening, so he just got up on his bunk bed and cried himself to sleep. The next morning the guard opened Stuart's cell for breakfast, and 2 minutes later Colin walked into Stuart's cell. Tyrone was still sleeping, so he couldn't hear anything. Stuart looked at Colin and said, "Help me," with tears coming down his face. "I'm being turned out in prison." Colin then said to Stuart, "What are you even doing in prison?" Stuart replied saying, "The guards think I'm a prisoner. They think I'm an inmate, so when I tried to go home they wouldn't let me leave and just locked me in prison. You have to help me, Colin. You have to tell the guards the truth. You have to help me get out of here." Colin replied and said, "I can't help you because that would be classed as snitching." Stuart then said, "Forget this snitching nonsense. This is my real life and I'm your best friend. I'm the only person who came to see you in prison. I even put money on your books and I am now pleading with you for help, and now you can't even help me. You told me you ran your wing, but that was a lie because you are also being turned out in prison just like me." Colin went silent and then said, "I can't help you, Stuart," before running out the cell and running away. Stuart was shocked because he actually thought Colin was his friend, but maybe they were not as close as he thought they were. Tyrone now started to wake up while saying to Stuart, "What's all that noise?" Stuart replied saying, "It's nothing, but let's go and get some breakfast." Tyrone got up out of his bed and ran towards the door, slamming it shut while saying, "Forget breakfast. We can eat noodles and tuna when we are finished having fun because I have loads of packs. I'm roasting, so you need to give me those sweet cheeks of yours right now." Stuart was still sore from last night and didn't want to do that type of stuff again, so he tried to bang on the door screaming, "Guards, help!" Tyrone backhanded him and said, "Shut up, woman." Tyrone hit Stuart so hard that one of his side teeth fell out of his mouth onto the prison floor. Stuart was in pain with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Tyrone pushed Stuart onto the lower bunk and then turned him on his belly. Tyrone then took off Stuart's booty shorts and then slammed his tings into Stuart. Stuart was now on his belly while Tyrone was on top of him, pounding his cheeks. Tears were falling down Stuart's face as he begged Tyrone to stop, but Tyrone did not stop. Tyrone clapped Stuart's cheeks for a further 15 minutes before shooting the biggest load of cream pie inside of Stuart. Stuart was crying and was in so much pain, but then a miracle happened. The door opened and 2 guards walked in the cell. Stuart quickly jumped off the bed and ran over to the guards, holding on to one of their legs, shaking and trembling in fear. Stuart was traumatized by his experience in prison. He wouldn't let go of the guard's leg while saying, "I'm sorry for disrespecting you before, but please help me. I don't belong in prison and have been put in prison by mistake, so please save me," while tears poured down Stuart's face like a flowing river. The guards both looked at each other and started laughing while telling Stuart, "We know you don't belong here. There has been a mistake in our paperwork which had you down as a prisoner, but it turns out you were right and you are not a prisoner after all, so it's time for you to go home." Stuart felt relieved and happy to go home, so he ran out the cell. The guards even offered to drive Stuart back home, but Stuart didn't trust them, so he told them he would make his own way home. The guards let him get showered so he could wash all the lipstick and cream pie off his body. They also gave him his clothes and even gave him nail varnish remover to remove the paint off his fingers and toenails. Once Stuart was ready to leave, he was then brought down to the prison reception. He was then given all his stuff back and then he was released from prison. Once Stuart was released, he vowed to never return to any prison ever again. He couldn't believe Colin didn't even try to help him so he could go home. This experience has opened his eyes and made him realize that Colin was never his friend. While in the taxi on his way home, he thought to himself, "I can't believe I just got turned out in prison.